Morning. Pardon the delay. Lots of troubles this morning getting set up, but that's okay. That's okay. We're doing great. Good morning, team. What's up, my man? We are winning, indeed. Sun's up in Florida. Buenos dias, Bitcoiners. Jeez, 1 second. Have a blessed day, everyone. Have a blessed day. Feeling free and uncensored. I'm going to skip because I'm a little late. My dogs woke up before the sunrise this morning. Total racist dogs. Oh, no, man. What are you going to do? Habib, good morning, everyone. Let's let today's Moscow time be a motivation to do your own research as best you can to reach the real truth. Without proof of work, there won't be any truth. Habib, that's well put. We got some stuff today to talk about. Muslim Bitcoiner, assalam. My homegirl AOC thinks current migrant pales in comparison to what we went through during Ellis Island. We're going to be talking about her today. She's our thumbnail that they wouldn't. I can't even get on Discord. That's part of what happened this morning. I'm booted from Discord, of all places. Who gets booted from Discord? Unreal. Indeed, it is a full moon. Full moon. We love the full moons. She's getting drafted. Yeah, tech problems, kind of, P-Man. The Mid-Journey thing not working was a unexpected delay, because I tried it on a few devices. So I switched devices at a certain point. I switched to that laptop or that desktop instead of this desktop. I thought maybe, but it was the IP address. Then I tried to switch browsers. That wouldn't work. So I'm just banned. I just got booted from Discord too. Oh, okay, Nick. Yeah. Okay, great. It's Discord itself. Okay, great, Nick. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't understand what was happening. I tried all kinds of maneuverings and works on the phone. Yeah, it wouldn't generate images for me though. That's what I needed. And I kind of have everything in its place. So, and it's okay. I had another AI generator I can use, but just wasted a bit of time looking through it. But it doesn't really matter, right? Because time, right? It's just from clocks and stuff, right? Better to set your time either by the sun or Bitcoin, both of which are running right now, right? So we're okay. Let's talk about what's new. Happy Friday, you amazing earthlings, indeed. All right, let's get started on Moscow time. We got some great fake news today. This one's just a little, just to get your palate a little in tune with what we're doing here, right? I just want to get a little bit primed. I had a really, really great one. This is from Scientific American. Scientific, it's full of scientists, right? Scientific American. And this is the article that they have today. Climate change, it's time to engineer the sky. Global warming is so rampant that some scientists say we should begin altering the stratosphere to block incoming sunlight, even if it jeopardizes rain and crops. Thank you, scientists. We all trust you to block out, to get it exactly right, how much of the sun we need to block out, right? I'm sure they'll get it. I'm sure it's like just a little dial, right? You just turn the dial and you get what you want. This one's great. So there was all kinds of trouble in Philadelphia 2 days ago. If you're into that kind of thing, some people like watching it like sports. Let's watch the riots tonight and see which team is fighting who and what's going on. So there was a big one in Philadelphia. If you didn't see, all kinds of trouble. We're not going to go over it, right? The Philadelphia newspaper wrote about it. They said, see the aftermath of looting and vandalism across Philadelphia. And they shared all the pictures, right? The damage stretched from Center City to Northeast Philadelphia, police said, right? So, wow, they're Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper talking about the destruction of their city, right? And Philadelphia, of course, if you know the U.S. map, right? Philadelphia, really close to Washington, D.C., right? Really like not suburban, but if you take the train from Washington, D.C. to New York, for example, which I used to do all the time, right? First thing's Baltimore, then it's Philadelphia, and then just a little bit more, and you're in New York, right? So it's just all connected, right? So Washington, D.C. is very close to Philadelphia, right? And people went into the Washington Post wondering what happened in Philadelphia the night before, right? The Philadelphia Inquirer here They had a whole list of pictures, like I just said, see the aftermath of the looting, right? Well, Washington Post had 0 articles on Philadelphia, but they had this really good one, okay? Because you got to know. In Texas, all right, so the Washington Post runs an article on Texas the same day as the Philadelphia stuff. In Texas, guns are everywhere, whether concealed or in the open. To live in Texas is to live surrounded by guns. Each morning, people strap guns inside suits, boots, bras, and belly band holsters that render them invisible. They stash firearms in purses and toolboxes and even guns in protests at the state capitol. Whoa! Philadelphia? Nah. Texas. They got guns, guys. Careful. This one's pretty good. So there's I guess he was the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, right? He had some words for the Russians vis-a-vis U.S. tanks. So the head of the Pentagon asked the Russian military, so he asked them, right? He asked the Russian military not to hunt American Abrams tanks. That's what he said, right? He says, don't do that. And he says, a repetition of the situation with German Leopard tanks when they were hunted is unacceptable, right? I saw these calls on the internet. Play by the rules. So the U.S. Secretary of Defense is telling the Russians, play by the rules. It's going to work. It's going to be great. This one's really great, right? So Trump went yesterday and gave a talk in Michigan, or the day before. He was, he always counter programs the GOP debates. So instead, he went to Michigan and spoke with some people involved in car manufacturing and gave a speech there. And MSNBC lets us know, first of all, in a speech Wednesday night at a non-union auto parts company, right? Because Joe went to the union one, so he's a better guy, right? In a non-union auto parts company in Michigan, the former president. So this is what MSNBC is telling you that Trump said in his speech. That sounds credible. This is what he said, right? The former president made clear that he thinks auto workers and those in the communities that depend on car manufacturing are very stupid people. Of course he said that, right? Who do we have to fact check MSNBC on this? No, of course. Trump goes around to speeches where everyone loves him and tells the people that are there that they're stupid. That's exactly what he does. Everybody knows Trump is really into that, right? And this one is the best. I've said many times, there will be some Moscow Time editions, some Moscow Time submissions that can one day be considered for hanging in a museum or in the Louvre or some place where you really want that Moscow Time aesthetic, right? The how fake can you get? So Zelensky was on the news yesterday, right? He did some U.S. news interviews. And the journalists tried to push him a little bit on his defense minister, because it turns out now that we know his defense minister Reznikov, right, ran off with a couple $2 billion, right? So the journalists, tried to tell Zelensky, like, what about accountability? And Zelensky says, no. Okay, and this is as far as the journalist took it, right? He goes, no. He didn't run off with billions of dollars from American taxpayers, he said, right? Actually, the money he ran off with was from Ukrainian taxpayers. Come on, it wasn't the same money. It's different money. That's what he said. Swear to God, that's his answer. All right, so that's what we got for Moscow Time. Now, in real news, our theme today is AOC DC Crosswired border cross shifts economic polarity. What I mean basically is that, everyone's been saying it. We live in an upside down world right now. Things that are opposite of what you think, right? So I came to this idea because, people have been saying it for a while. Whoops. This is a pretty funny story. So yesterday, Elon Musk decides to go to the Eagle Pass border crossing in Texas to find out what's going on for himself, right? He's been saying it for a while. He said, I'm going to go check out the border crossing. I want to see what's going on. Really, truthfully, ever since RFK went there, the credibility, let's say, of what Trump has been saying since the beginning about the border has shifted, because even what Kennedy did, right? Kennedy went and spent time there, recorded the border crossings. The piece that I never knew was that they weren't even coming from Latin America anymore. And that was, I think, a revelation to many people. And when he went down there and talked just about how crazy it was and how wild it was, and he talked immediately about shutting the border down and all of these things. It has shifted the conversation a little bit, right? It took it out, I think, a bit of the Trump vortex, and was a separate set of eyes that brought a lot of credibility to the problem. And so, not to say that it wasn't a problem and Trump wasn't credible on it, and a lot of credible people didn't believe Trump. I think all that's true, but having, in many ways, Kennedy come out and say it has sort of amplified the fullness of the situation, right? And again, I didn't know anything about, and Trump has never mentioned anything about who's actually coming, right? He only says they're not sending their best, which might be true. So yesterday, Elon Musk goes to the border, right? And he witnessed it firsthand. But here's the funny thing. AOC got offended because he went down there, right? So he goes down there, and AOC writes back that that him being there, right, was, what did she say exactly? I want to find out what she said exactly, right? So she goes there and says that she's upset that Elon Musk visited the southern border. So out of nowhere, she makes a point of saying, "Why did Elon go to the southern border?" Right? And so she ends up criticizing him for going to the southern border. And in the end, in the Twitter conversation around it, right, Elon says to her, she's just not that smart when she's complaining about the border. Okay. So she's complaining about the border. He comes in and says she's just not that smart. Right. And it actually comes from the migrant crisis and Ellis Island and all that stuff. Right. So she started by saying, it's not so bad what's going on in Mexico or at the border. Ellis Island people had it way worse. And she's saying boy math is needed, 15 attempts to count the votes correctly to become speaker, and then shutting down the government 9 months later. So she's here criticizing what McCarthy did. And Ashley St. Clair says, girl math is saying immigrants coming legally through Ellis Island is the same as 3 million undocumented migrants pouring through our border and costing New York City $1 billion to house migrants in free hotels. So Elon says to that, she's just not that smart, right? And then Elon takes the bait, and she says, I wasn't born rich and became the youngest woman in American history to be elected to Congress. Then I investigated Cohen, authored the largest FEMA funeral assistance program in history, and led creation of U.S. Climate Corps to create tens of thousands of new jobs. And she goes, stay mad, right? And Elon says, I take it back. You're obviously a genius. It doesn't get much better than that, right? People talking a bit more about it, right? Colin Rugg saying AOC has posted on X about how she was upset about Elon Musk. Instead of working to fix the migrant crisis, AOC whined about Musk taking a joyride. The House is holding important votes in D.C. tonight. People are scrambling to avoid a shutdown, but this Republican congressman decided to skip town to joyride with a billionaire when his own party has just a single-digit margin and he needs the vote. Imagine if she cared this much about securing the border, right? Simon Atiba also brings it up, and he says, she then explained how smart she is, right? So this is the same thing about how she wasn't rich and all this stuff. And so that's the story about AOC. But she also took time out of her day yesterday, right? In all of this stuff, talking about Elon being an idiot for going to the border, him saying she's not smart, her citing all of her achievements to prove she's smart, right? And then she comes out and also starts talking about how she's doing the old, there's no evidence on Joe Biden, right? That she called the GOP's Biden impeachment inquiry a sham and an embarrassment. Remember, we always talk as well, by the way, about resistance to embarrassment, and it's one of the most important thing Bitcoiners can do. And it's something we've trained ourselves at, so it's not hard, right? We've been doing the whole, oh, you're into Bitcoin thing. Like, this is my 10-year time frame right now. In 2013, I'm obsessed about Bitcoin. I'm pushing it into the Senate now. By the time October is finished, I've got $1 million together to do a Senate study. I'm already saying we're going to fly in Andreas, and all this stuff is already starting to happen, right? But 10 years ago, people were making fun of me, right? On the way up, right now, everyone was like, whoa, what's going on? But by January, February, I kept the receipts. I got friends laughing at me. You're quitting your job for this stuff, you have to train yourself to get over that, right? You can't let social embarrassment ever affect you. It's one of the most important things you learn about being a Bitcoiner, and one of the most important weapons we actually have, right? That we can't be shamed and embarrassed into following the herd, that having no reaction to embarrassment, not having the embarrassed reflex, or at least being able to control the embarrassed reflex, is actually necessary to create hyper-Bitcoinization, and is our superpower, right? It's what allows us, it's what has allowed us to grow the network through the hard times and persevere. It's what allows you to hodl in the end. Hodl is not so much discipline as it is not being embarrassed about the life you've chosen, right? So here, this is just typical AOC trying to use the social stigma persuasion tactic, saying it's embarrassing, right? So, but we know embarrassment doesn't hurt us, right? MSNBC writes about it and says, during Thursday's impeachment fishing expedition, Ocasio-Cortez pointed out the simple fact that none of the witnesses called by House Republicans have had any firsthand knowledge of Biden's purported wrongdoing. So what she's saying here is they have no firsthand knowledge, as in they weren't the briber or in on the bribes with him. What else is firsthand knowledge? They're not they're not involved in the transaction. Is that is that her point? Right? That the GOP did not participate in the bribes with Biden. You have to be party to the bribes to have an opinion on it, right? You have to either give the bribe or take the bribe to have an opinion on the bribe. Is that am I missing something? Firsthand knowledge? Isn't it all hearsay? Isn't everything about this? Someone said something, we're investigating. Are they credible? Are they not? Isn't that the point of the inquiry? Isn't that the point of getting people on the record and having them swear under oath about what they did or saw? That's what I think. Indeed, it's this whole thing again about not having the evidence, right? Not having the evidence. And I'll go back to Dan Bongino's point. So Dan Bongino, I guess, now running for Senate. Did you guys see that? Is this true? I didn't have it confirmed, but I saw him campaigning yesterday. Could have been an old picture. I think he might have done that before. Anyway, of course, Dan Bongino, if you don't know, he was involved in the Parler app, right? I think he was involved in the Parler app. I think he might have some involvement as well with Rumble or something. Anyway, Dan Bongino was on Fox News for a long time, was fired from that, has a large following, has been a Trump guy for a long time. But he still has the best response to anyone who says there's no evidence, right? And I'll do my best to read it in the speed I think it's required to read it in order to make it funny. So Dan Bongino says, the Democrats are correct. Outside of the bank records, the suspicious activity reports, the wire transfers, the private bank transactions, the LLCs, the texts, the emails, the WhatsApp messages, the photos of Joe and Hunter business partners, the voicemails to his son, the two business partners saying Joe is the brand, the big guy, and the chairman, the two whistleblowers' testimony, the recorded phone calls between Biden and Poroshenko, the video of Joe Biden bragging about firing the Ukrainian prosecutor, and Hunter's statements that he's giving his dad half of his income. There is no evidence of Joe Biden being involved. It's a pretty good one, right? Pretty good one. We got a lot of evidence yesterday in the thing, right? So there was the inquiry started. Rep. Pat Fallon lays out the evidence that Joe Biden meeting with corrupt oligarchs in Russia, China, and Ukraine after they paid his son Hunter Biden millions of dollars. They have foreigners that deliver pallets of cash to the Bidens, and then they have dinner with Joe. This is direct evidence of corruption and bribery, right? Byron Donalds got a couple good quotes too. To my colleagues on either side, we are going to start talking about evidence now, right? Talking about all these evidence. You had the Mace, I can't remember her first name again. She was saying it's treason, right? The impeachment inquiry released Hunter Biden's text messages from a Chinese energy company business, saying that his uncle's brother will be attending meetings, right? His uncle's brother, President Joe Biden, saying his uncle's brother will be so right away using the word uncle's brother. Hunter said that, right? My uncle's brother. President Biden's brother, James Biden, told FBI agents that he and Hunter were trying to help the Chinese energy company purchase U.S. energy assets. While they believed the company's chairman was directly tied to Xi Jinping, Rob Walker, a Biden business partner, also confirmed that President Biden attended a meeting with CEFC chairman Yi Jianming, who Hunter and James considered a protege of President Xi. The Bidens received millions from CEFC China Energy, including $1 million wire transfer from Patrick Ho, whom Hunter called the spy chief of China, after Ho was arrested by the DOJ for bribing African politicians with millions in cash and oil rights. And why did Biden participate in business meetings aimed at financially enriching the family by selling U.S. energy assets to a Chinese company with direct ties to Xi Jinping? So there's a bunch more of this, right? There's all kinds of people sort of bringing it up today. We learned in the last 24 hours that a $250,000 wire from Biden in 2019 to Joe with his address. We learned about that a few days ago on Joe Biden's actual address, right? Oh, by the way, did you see this is what AI can do, by the way. This is from, I think 2 or 3 days ago, and it was our friend Hans Monkey. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, but Hans Monkey broke down the defense of this. And it's honestly one of the neatest, I guess, screenshots or tactics you can use. So Hans Monkey took one sentence of the person who defended this address piece, right? And broke it down into its constituent parts. I'm going to get it for you because it's actually hilarious. It's actually hilarious to see this. I can get it on my phone. Hans Monkey took one sentence and did what you got to do, right? Took all the pieces of what this fellow was saying and said the following. Let me get it. It was really honestly too good. Let me see. Yeah, so here's the Ian Sams, right? It comes out and says, so this is the whole thing on Hunter sending money to his own address. And this is the defense, right? This is the actual defense of Hunter sending money to his dad's address from the Chinese. Imagine them arguing if someone stayed at your parents' house during the pandemic, listed as their permanent address for work, and got a paycheck. The parents somehow also worked for the employer. It's bananas, right? So Hans Mankey breaks it down, right? So first of all, the first thing, during the pandemic, there was no pandemic. It was 2019. Hunter lived in Hollywood Hills at the time, so he wasn't putting his permanent address there. Then it tries to normalize a 53-year-old man living with his parents, right? Then it pretends that money from China was for actual work, right? And then it was Hunter was employed by Chinese Communist Party operatives. That's what you have to accept if you believe this. It's just like your parents get money from your paycheck, right? So he's it's just his job. He just works for the Chinese Communist Party, and money from them is actual work. And it was a pandemic, even though it was 2019. And he listed his dad's address, but it was normal to live with your parents during the pandemic, which was in 2019, 1 year before, which was in 2020, 1 year after he actually cited this, right? And then this whole thing like living with your parents. So imagine you have to go through that. But just this one tweet, right? Hans Mankey like underlined every part and put an arrow and showed why it's fake. More or less, that's what AI could do for us to understand fake news and to read it, right? You just re-inject the context into the statement, because that's the point of this statement. He just rips out the context and then says, oh, believe this, right? And then Hans, who I wish I knew how to pronounce his name, Monkey. I keep wanting to say Hans Monkey, but it's not that. So there he goes. He breaks it down and he makes it perfect, right? I think that's if that's something that starts catching on, that's kind of what Community Notes does in a sense, that it injects context, but you still have to tie it together yourself. Hans, what he did was he showed each part of the sentence and how manipulated it was. And if you actually start twisting the manipulations, it's incoherent, right? It's exactly what he did. It relies on you accepting. If you want to believe this guy's statement, you actually have to accept that Hunter worked for the Chinese Communist Party. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, right? So there you go. Pretty funny stuff. So let me get back to the thing here. So so you get all these people now seeing the inquiry. You had, as I said, AOC saying there's no point to this, right? This is all a big fraud. But meanwhile, you had Elon asking straight up, why does the media focus more on giving Ukraine money than securing our own border? And how is it now this has become so unanimous amongst the media in America? So he has big questions, right? Simultaneous to that, yesterday or 2 days ago, Elon fired the entire election monitoring team inside of Twitter. So they had started this thing and people were starting to get worried, right? Because it looked like people were starting to disappear again. And it turns out that the election integrity team started or headed by this guy Roderick something, which everyone outed as an anti-Trumper, and he had blue sky sort of right in his bio, and he'd been doing, you know, what people think is more of this stuff that Mike Benz is always underlining, this national endowment for the democracy type thing, the compliance as a service, the censorship being offloaded to these untrusted third-party intermediaries. Isn't it amazing that Bitcoiners and Satoshi gave us insight into the third-party security holes, but it actually extends across the entire landscape? It isn't just banks. It isn't just the bank intermediaries. It's everything. It's the news intermediaries. And so yesterday, Elon said the exact same thing again, right? He said that people, and he wished that more people did what we're doing here, right? Which is citizen journalism, and that citizen journalism itself could be the thing that sort of fixes the world, right? You've got Cenk Uygur now. I guess he mentioned the Young Turks guy. He's going to run for president, right? So look, I'm no fan of his, and I don't necessarily trust him. I had someone, a fella from our breakup gang, who helped inform me that he's probably compromised, which I don't follow him enough to know. Apparently, he was a lot more independent thinking before, became less independent thinking around Trump time. Trump, absolutely broke a lot of people's brains, so that makes sense. So he's going to run for president. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the citizen journalism thing in a nutshell, but that's what. But that's what Elon came out and said. Elon came out and said, we need more citizen journalists, and that if more people use X to do this, it could actually change the whole world, right? It's one of the reasons why I've been doing it, right? It's one of the reasons why I think, indeed, you need normal people, not part of a big media organization. You need normal people just giving their opinions without too much fear of being censored and vilified and those kinds of things. So there he goes, right? He makes the case again that Twitter and the capacity to do this is now here, and that the third-party security holes that are the media can be expunged because X is a platform that can offer this kind of free speech. So Mike Benz broke down this. Oh yeah, by the way, he also got mentioned in the Rolling Stone now. So Mike Benz is now getting targeted by Rolling Stone. So he's a musician, right? And so he was like, look, Mom, I finally made it to the Rolling Stone. And so he says, imagine being the 74th leg of a CIA media centipede, having to crawl around legging out your incoherent bile screeds like this to earn your paycheck. And he says that, and Mike Benz, a former State Department official who at one point was angling for access to the so-called Twitter files, so making him sound like he's out there begging. He had a whole big thread, by the way, Mike Benz, yesterday, more on music as an instrument of statecraft, right? Again, because there's no doubt what's his name was great the other day, Blinken, right? He had a lot of talent, actually. And here he goes into how the Rolling Stone has become actually a part of this whole thing. And it's been going on forever, right? They've been using music, rock and roll, jazz. There's total history, punk and rock and metal rock in Germany in the 80s. Winds of Change, the Scorpions, all those songs. He says all of that stuff was a big part of the movement. Rap and hip hop in Black communities in the 90s, also part of it. So there you go. And he also gave us all a warning. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. This is gonna hit, but I think it's gonna work. Zuckerberg released the Ray-Ban AR glasses yesterday, showing how you can have a conversation with them. I think people are going to use them. I don't know if the Facebook version is going to take off. I've been thinking these glasses are going to be a big deal for a while. I was a fan of the idea of Google Glasses when they started. And how I got into the Google Glass thing from the beginning was, if you remember the Boston bombings, they were actually, because so many pictures were taken at the finish line, they were actually able to reanimate the entire scene of the last few minutes because of all the individual still pictures. That's what actually gave me a lot of my ideas for eyeballs in Satoshi Wedding Murders. The Boston bombing is where I got a lot of those ideas about everyone having a camera and what it's going to look like. And so the glasses are here. They're actually pretty cool. I hate to say it. Mike Benz, so you'll actually be able to live stream with them, and you can have a conversation with them because there's AI enabled in the glasses, so you can actually look out, and what you're looking at, you can have a conversation like, what is that? And it will tell you. So it's pretty close to the eyeball that I'm describing. I believe in the end, the AirPods and the glasses and the phone will sort of merge into one device, and that device will have holographic projection capacity and a few other tricks that we haven't seen yet. But I'm anti Elon's brain chip inside. I don't think you need it. I think you can get just as much out of it with an interface. It's still jacked into you. Like, you still are symbiotic with it. We're already symbiotic with our phones. I mean, if you think that when you take a drug, it alters your personality, which I think it does, right? If you take a drug, it changes the chemicals in your blood and your whatever, right? And you're sort of a different person. Phones do the same. I don't see why anyone would suggest a phone isn't the same as smoking weed or drinking a coffee or anything like that, or smoking cigarettes. It's dopamine, it's endorphins, it's all the things that oxytocin, there's no touch, but like, there's a reason why pornography is so popular, right? So I'm not saying it's all healthy. Right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, having a phone already, you're already combined with it, whether you like it or not, because the chemical makeup inside your body changes. So it doesn't have to be plugged in to actually affect your insides. Phones do it to this day without being plugged in whatsoever. So my prediction is you will never actually plug in, like some people suggest. You won't need to, but you're plugged in merely because your body interacts with the devices, and we have relationships with them. That's, you don't like to think of it that way, but it's true. Or at least that's how I see it. So, we have these relationships with devices as it is, and they are already altering our insides because they're altering our reward systems. They're altering stimulation, the chemistry of your body, the internal chemistry of your body, metabolic rates even affected by it, right? So it's hugely important, and I think all the devices will just sort of be that. I don't think you need plugs and cutting holes in your brain and all that stuff. Useless, right? There's other ways to do it. So, but Mike Benz warns us, right? It's like you can already hear the wildebeest stampede of Biden state NGO hordes, webs of university cutouts and censorship mercenary middleware firms all hoofing thunderously. Visual misinformation in meta glasses, a threat to democracy, right? And he's saying, can you imagine putting a meta AI run through God knows how many meta trust and safety sensors and brainwash filters on your face? There were space monkeys in the late 1950s shot into raw orbit I'd trade places with first. I don't know. I wouldn't do that. I want those glasses, fake account or something. But I'm definitely after them. But he also gets into the Twitter and the Twitter thing. So Rolling Stone took issue with the election team getting fired by Elon 2 days ago, and they come out and say, this is a Rolling Stone headline. So this is what makes Mike Benz so great, right? We've known for a while. It was RFK who first told us that Rolling Stone was that it had fallen and was captured. We weren't sure of that before. We'd sort of heard whispers, but it looks pretty obvious now. And Mike Benz sort of picking on them here as an obvious low-hanging fruit case of them being what he says they are. So first of all, Rolling Stone, the section is called Democracy, Dumbocracy, right? I'm going to steal that. Thank you, Rolling Stone. Dumbocracy. So Democracy. Twitter fires election integrity team ahead of 2024 elections. Aaron Roderick's co-lead of the department was targeted in a right-wing harassment campaign after trying to hire new employees to combat political misinformation. So he was just trying to combat political misinformation, and they fired him by right-wing harassment campaign. So Mike Benz said, libel, wouldn't expect anything less from the dregs of a has-been music rag that weirdly echoes CIA talking points at every turn. But look, they did exactly what I said. Simply tweeting is framed as a campaign. Simply tweeting is framed as a campaign to launder in a flavor of inauthentic and coordinated conspiracy. Benz goes on to say, $10 says Rolling Stone magazine, the very weird conduit for CIA media operations around Russiagate and other ops, gets rolled into the State Department's new Global Music Diplomacy Initiative, either as a formal media partner or on State Department media coordination email and distribution list. So remember, what he's saying here is that now Rolling Stone is explicitly in this thing that Blinken launched 2 days ago, like explicitly involved in it, right? So now we know. But here's what I think, right? Here's the point of everything we're sort of getting at today, right? One more thing that's great. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow. I'm going to have to go a little early because I've got Prince Philip at the top of the hour, the heir to the Yugoslav crown, who is a Bitcoiner. And we're going to be talking about what's going on in Amsterdam in under 2 weeks. I had dinner with him before. It was a lot of fun. A couple years ago, we were chatting over some steak in Miami. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, here's the story we're going to talk about tomorrow. It's Donald Trump is suing Christopher Steele for the dossier. It's going to be great, right? Totally into that. What's his name says interesting. But let's go back to what our point is today. And this is the Crosswired. This is our theme, right? So this comes from Jake Chervinsky. So not only yesterday did we have the border fight with AOC, and AOC also involved in the inquiry is for stupid people because there's no evidence and Joe Biden is innocent. And Joe Biden is innocent because no Republicans were on the take with him. There's no firsthand knowledge, as she said, right? So Jake Chervinsky, yesterday, there was also hearings in Congress about crypto and Twitter, and Gary Gensler, crypto and Bitcoin, and Gary Gensler was in town, right? So Gensler was testifying yesterday. And Jake Chervinsky says the following. He says, crypto has turned DC upside down. Many progressives are fighting against technological progress and oppose regulation. Many conservatives are promoting innovation and fighting to expand administrative authority. Only something truly transformative can shake things up this way. Chervinsky's wrong here. Everything is backwards right now, right? It's whatever dichotomy you had put on conservative, liberal, forget it. We see it in war. We see it in everything AOC is saying, right? AOC coming across more and more like a corporate talking points shill than ever before, because you can't just blame it on stupidity anymore. You can't just blame it on naivete. If she's coming out and making arguments like there's no firsthand knowledge, right? It's ridiculous. So indeed, everything is backwards. And that's a good thing, right? If we're in this world where the border conversation with Ukraine backwards, the conversation about money going to Ukraine and not being used on American health and infrastructure backwards, we see election integrity stuff, right? Remember, if you ask anyone who's at January 6th, they were there to protest the stolen election, right? every one of them, without exception, right? They were not there for any insurrection. They were there to protest an insurrection. And so it's been backwards for quite a while. But that's the good news. The good news for Bitcoiners is because things are so backwards, the desire, the appetite to flip things back into a place that makes sense. And they've only become so out of whack because of the spin, because of the psyops. That's what it's managed to estrange reality so much, is that the spin and the gravitational pull that comes from fake logic. Where, like I said, when you go into MSNBC, you can feel the hand going up your butt and going into your brain, and everyone's susceptible. Even I'm susceptible, right? I talk about this stuff every day in order to strengthen myself against it, to shield myself against it. But nevertheless, all human minds work the same way, right? Once you read it, you can't help but imagine the words in your brain. And luckily, we have enough context in order to not get persuaded by this stuff, but it's very persuasive stuff. This is military grade persuasion technology being blasted at you every day. And when you go on MSNBC, you feel it. You feel the hand going up your butt. You feel it trying to get into your brain, trying to use your mouth and get into your eyes and manipulate you, right? Now, that has been going on for so long that some people can't even tell anymore. And that's one of the great things that is happening, is that once you realize how much things have become estranged from reality, once you realize how much the world is indeed backwards, there becomes a huge void. And nature abhors a void, a vacuum of this sort. And people are going to rush for the conditions that fulfill their desire to have stability, predictability, an easy to understand world that isn't spun, that isn't psyops, that doesn't permit these kinds of psychological attacks on people. So the good news is Bitcoin. So Jake Chervinsky here saying crypto has turned DC upside down. DC is already upside down. The only thing that can straighten it out is Bitcoin. That's it. That is what can fill the void, and that is what can align these things so that things make sense to people anymore. Remember, we often, and on this show anyway, talk about the economy and the political system as a psychological engine, and its ability to perpetuate forward, to have horsepower, to be able to put one foot in front of the other, is what comes from a commercially viable economic system that creates secure relationships, transactions, and predictable commercial endeavors together, right? That's how you build engineering products. That's how you build good companies. We're nowhere near that anymore because the system itself has spun into what we already recognize as upside down and backwards. And that's a good thing, right? The border conversation is uniquely capable of creating a crosswire situation in America and to shift economic polarity. And that's what we want, right? We're there for that. All right. I'm going to have to cut it early because we got the prince and I can't make him wait, right? We don't want to make a prince wait, right? We don't want to make princes wait. We love princes. Morning, guys. Better guns than NPCs, indeed. I think we got peak stupidity yesterday in Montreal. There was a protest against car culture. Yeah, well, I'm not against protesting some forms of car culture. I like my electric bikes and such. What I love about Montreal right now is that you know what they did? They banned affordable housing now. All the developers paid fines, which is like a real Bitcoin Citadel philosophy. No, we're not. We're not doing it. Right? We're not doing it. I believe human minds are best at injecting context, but the affordances to do so aren't ubiquitous in our communication infrastructure. Yeah, permissionless, immutable. Yeah. Todd, thanks. You look forward to the show. We're happy, man. We're happy. Longest distance from east to west, 5,514 kilometers from Cape Spear to Labrador to the Yukon-Alaska border. No car needed. Muslim Bitcoiner. China had to install thousands of surveillance, while in the West, your next door neighbor and everyone else does the government job with their phones, Alexas. Yeah, they do. Yeah. The phone addiction is a far bigger issue for most people than they'd ever like to admit, myself included. It's important to recognize your addiction. Oh yeah, no, I'm 100% addicted. I don't think I could. I mean, I go many days. I can go many days without it, but I like it. Definitely an addiction. Coming back from the park yesterday, my child and I are now in 20 parents' galleries, half of them going on social media and never leaving without a mask now. Literally no sense of peace anymore. Yeah. Yeah, there's privacy is not. Look, I'm not in the Bitcoin game for privacy, right? Once again, I think you flip it the other way around and you get transparency for the government. Now, I wish we had privacy, but I just that's a second order battle, I believe. We're going to get there, but I think we have this get the government under control thing first with the money, right? That's where I'm at. Feinstein died. Not a big surprise. Not a big surprise, right? Not a big surprise. The phone is not a phone, it's an environment. Eric Weinstein. Yeah, that's a great one. Apt quote. Yeah. MSLSD, bad trip, baby. Don't do it. No, don't. Yeah, they're very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. All right, team. Did someone tell her? Yeah, she's a bit zombie-ish. Huh? All right, team. Pardon me on the slow or the pardon me watching on my phone. Addicted to the breakup. Thanks, Jeffy. You know, we do the coffee thing. We inject drugs into our show too, guys. Right? This is the most popular drug in the world. All right, team. Thanks for everything. I propose masks that don't do anything other than cover your face for private. Wear them around NPCs and breathe easy. My NPC book is coming out soon, guys. I'm trying to get it all put together. I have some pretty good images. All right, everyone. Ciao. Come see me on Spaces. Me and the Prince. We're going to hang out.